A bobcat kitten found in a landfill crate, but what she scratched inside the box broke me. A quiet trash hauler thinks it's just another workday until he pries open an old crate and finds a wild animal trembling inside. But that's not the shocking part. Scratched deep into the wood are desperate words. Words that should never have been there. Suddenly. This isn't about rescuing a kitten, it's about uncovering a secret that someone powerful wants. Buried. Forever. Each clue pulls him deeper into danger. Each step closer to the truth that could destroy him. Because what started in the landfill isn't trash at all, it's evidence. Evidence that someone is willing to kill for. Now the question is, when the truth claws its way out, will he survive long enough to tell it? Before we start, take a moment to comment your name or city. It's my way of remembering that behind each play is a real heartbeat. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Colorado landfill as Caleb Danner guided his waste truck. Through the maze of debris, the worn steering wheel felt familiar under his calloused hands. A constant companion in his solitary work. At 42 years old, he had grown used to the whispers and sideways glances from townspeople, who saw him as nothing more than the man who lived in the trash. As he maneuvered past the entrance, he caught sight of Mary from the convenience store nudging her teenage son and pointing in his direction. The boy's nose wrinkled in disgust. Caleb kept his eyes forward, letting their judgment roll off him. Like the morning dew on his truck's windshield. "There goes the trash man," he heard someone mutter. The words weren't new. He'd heard them all before. The endless loop of load, dump, and return had become his shield against a world that had forgotten him since Sarah's passing. The grinding gears of his truck filled the silence. As he backed up to his designated dumping spot, the morning light revealed a mountain of discarded appliances, washing machines, dryers, and refrigerators piled high like mechanical corpses. As he tilted the truck bed, something caught his eye among the avalanche of refuse, a wooden crate, battered but intact, wedged between a rusty dishwasher and a broken microwave. Caleb's boots crunched on scattered debris as he made his way to the crate. It wasn't unusual to find abandoned pet carriers or shipping boxes, but something about this one seemed different. The wood was solid, despite its scratched surface, and there was movement inside. His weathered hands gripped the edges of the crate, and as he lifted it, a fierce scratching sound erupted from within. The sudden noise nearly made him drop it. Carefully, he set it down on level ground and peered through the slats. Two wild eyes glowed back at him, a bobcat kitten no bigger than a house cat. Its spotted fur bristling with fear and aggression. The creature launched itself against the wooden walls, claws extended, making Caleb step back instinctively. But as he studied the crate more closely, his breath caught in his throat. There, carved into the inner walls with what must have been a knife or sharp tool, were words that made his heart skip a beat. "Help. She knows. I can't escape." The desperate message stood in stark contrast to the smooth wood, each letter deep and deliberate. Someone had taken time to carve these words, even while keeping a wild animal contained. The thought sent a chill down Caleb's spine despite the warming morning air. He ran his fingers over the carved letters, feeling each desperate groove. The kitten watched him warily, its small chest heaving with rapid breaths. How had it survived? Who had put it here? The questions tumbled through his mind like the garbage in his truck. For a moment, Caleb considered closing the truck and driving away, returning to his routine where mysterious crates and cryptic messages didn't exist. It would be easier to pretend he'd never seen it, to keep his head down and continue being invisible. That's what everyone expected of the trash man anyway. But the words seemed to burn into his mind. "Help. She knows. I can't escape." The plea was raw, urgent, impossible to ignore. The bobcat kitten had survived against all odds, and somehow that felt important. With careful movements, Caleb lifted the crate again. The kitten hissed, but seemed too exhausted to fight much more. He placed it in the cab of his truck, away from the morning chill. The creature's eyes followed his every move, wild and untrusting, yet somehow alive with the fierce will to survive. As he climbed back into the driver's seat, Caleb caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. A tired face lined with years of solitude stared back at him. The man who lived in the trash. They called him the man nobody noticed. But someone had noticed something terrible enough to carve a plea for help into a wooden crate. And now that plea had found its way to him. The truck's engine roared to life, and Caleb made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing his route, he turned toward home, the crate and its mysterious occupant secure beside him. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting new light on a day that had started like any other but had become something else entirely. The drive back to Caleb's cabin took longer than usual. Every bump in the road made the bobcat kitten snarl from inside its crate, reminding him of the unusual burden he'd taken on. His isolated home appeared through the trees. a weathered structure that matched his own worn exterior. Inside, Caleb placed the crate in his mudroom, away from the main living space. The kitten's eyes gleamed in the dim light as he carefully opened the crate door. It huddled in the back corner, its small body trembling. He noticed a slight limp in one of its hind legs. "You're hurt," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. The creature blinked at him, still wary but too exhausted to fight. Caleb found an old towel and some leftover chicken from his fridge. He placed both near the crate, then stepped back to give the animal space. As he watched the kitten, his mind wandered to the carved message. Was it just some teenager's idea of a sick joke? But the depth of the carved letters spoke of desperation, not mischief. The words had been etched with fierce determination. "Help, she knows. I can't escape." Something about the handwriting tugged at his memory. Caleb walked to his bedroom and pulled out an old church bulletin from his dresser drawer. There, in the margins, were notes written in a familiar hand, Sylvie Markham's handwriting. She used to help with the church newsletter, always scribbling little reminders to herself. Sylvie had vanished 3 weeks ago. The news had rippled through their small town, but like most things, it had quickly settled into uncomfortable silence. People said she'd probably just left town, tired of small town life. But the similarities between her handwriting and a desperate message in the crate made his stomach twist. He remembered her from church, always kind. Even to the trash man, she'd wave to him during service, sometimes bringing him a cookie during coffee hour. Her smile had reminded him of Sarah's, bright and genuine. Then one Sunday, her usual seat was empty. And the next, the kitten had started nibbling at the chicken, its movements cautious but determined. Like its presence was a sign he couldn't ignore. Caleb knew he had to start asking questions. The next morning, he drove into town earlier than usual. At Miller's General Store, he approached old Mrs. Miller as she stocked shelves. "Been meaning to ask," he said, trying to sound casual, "any word about Sylvie Markham?" Mrs. Miller barely glanced at him. "Oh, you know young people these days. Always chasing something bigger somewhere else." At the post office, he tried again with Bob Wheeler, who'd known Sylvie since she was little. "Heard anything from Sylvie lately?" "Ain't my business." Bob replied curtly. "Ain't yours either, Danner?" The responses were too quick, too dismissive. Something felt wrong. People didn't just vanish without a trace, leaving their jobs, their friends, their lives behind. And they certainly didn't carve desperate messages into wooden crates. Back at his cabin, Caleb found the kitten had moved from the crate to a sunny spot by the window. Its injured leg was healing, but trust came slowly. As he watched it, he thought about Sylvie, her kindness, her sudden disappearance. And now this possible cry for help. The quiet life he built, the routine that had sheltered him from pain since Sarah's death, felt disrupted. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Sylvie's disappearance and the message in the crate were connected. The same nagging certainty that had made him bring home the injured kitten wouldn't let him ignore this mystery. Looking at the carved words again, Caleb traced the letters with his finger. The desperate strokes matched the determined way Sylvie used to write her notes. The way she pressed hard into the paper as if each word mattered. Someone had taken the time to carve these words while keeping a wild animal contained. Someone who needed help. Someone who might be Sylvie. The townsfolk's dismissive attitudes only deepened his suspicion. Their quick deflections and uncomfortable silences spoke of something darker than a young woman simply leaving town. There was danger lurking beneath the surface of their peaceful community, and somehow, the message had found its way to him. The Bobcat Kitten watched him from its sunny perch, its wild eyes holding secrets of its own. Like the creature, the truth about Sylvie seemed both fierce and fragile, something that needed to be approached carefully, but couldn't be ignored. The quiet man who collected the town's garbage had stumbled onto something that wouldn't let him return to his solitary existence. Not until he uncovered what had really happened to Sylvie Markham. Caleb's truck rumbled up the long driveway to the Hale mansion, gravel crunching under his tires. The pristine white columns and manicured lawn made him feel even more out of place. In his work clothes, he'd chosen to come straight from his route, hoping to catch Vernon Hale off guard. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed inside the massive house. After a moment, Vernon Hale himself opened the door, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Caleb's worn jacket. "Mr. Danner." Hale's eyebrows rose. "This is unexpected." "Mr. Hale," Caleb cleared his throat. "I wanted to talk about Sylvie. Being from church and all, I've been worried." Hale's carefully composed face twitched. "Comin'. Then, though I'm not sure what a garbage man would know about my niece's affairs." The subtle jab stung, but Caleb followed him into a study filled with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. Hale didn't offer him a seat. "People are concerned," Caleb said, trying to keep his voice steady. It's not like Sylvie to just disappear without telling anyone. Hale's laugh was sharp and dismissive. And you're the expert on my niece now. The man who lives among the trash he collects. I noticed things, Caleb pressed on. Sylvie was happy. Here. She had friends, her church work. Listen carefully, Mr. Danner. Hale stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. Sylvie is a young woman who chose to leave this backwards town. She's not the first to seek better opportunities elsewhere, though I wouldn't expect someone of your station to understand ambition. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Hale's eyes had gone cold, his polite mask slipping just enough to reveal something darker underneath. I suggest you stick to hauling trash. Hale continued. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Making other people's problems disappear. Caleb felt a chill run down his spine. The words seemed chosen specifically to unsettle him. Now, if you'll excuse me. Hale gestured toward the door. I have actual business to attend to. As Caleb drove home, his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. He'd known confronting Hale was risky, but the man's reaction confirmed his worst fears. Something was very wrong. At the local diner that evening, he overheard whispered conversations about Sylvie. Probably ran off with some boyfriend, one woman said. You know how dramatic young girls can be. I heard she'd been acting strange before she left, another added, distant-like. Probably planning it all along. The stories seemed too convenient, too neat. But who would believe the town's reclusive garbage man over someone like Vernon Hale? Back at his cabin, Caleb found the Bobcat Kitten waiting by his door. Over the past few days, it had grown less frightened, even allowing him to sit nearby while it ate. Now it watched him with those intense wild eyes, reminding him of the desperate message that had brought them together. He sat heavily in his old armchair, doubt gnawing at him. What could he really do against someone like Vernon Hale? The man had money, influence, and clearly the power to make problems disappear. Caleb was just the man who collected the town's garbage, someone people looked through rather than at. The kitten approached cautiously, settling near his feet. Its presence was like a silent challenge to his doubts. Someone had carved those words. Someone had placed this wild creature in that crate as proof of life. Someone, likely Sylvie, was counting on those clues being found. Looking down at the healing kitten, Caleb remembered how fierce it had been in that crate, how it had fought to survive. Maybe that's what he needed to do now. Stay fierce, stay alive. Keep fighting even when the odds seemed impossible. The veiled threats from Hale echoed in his mind. He was no longer just a man doing his job, keeping to himself. He had become a threat to something powerful, something that had resources and influence he couldn't match. But he also had something they might not expect. The stubborn persistence that had kept him going after Sarah's death. And now, a living reminder of the truth scratched into those wooden walls. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the landfill as Caleb drove his truck along the familiar routes. But today, his eyes searched for more than just the usual collection points. Every pile of debris seemed to hold potential clues. He noticed an unusual number of construction materials, from Hale development sites, broken concrete, twisted metal, and splintered wood that seemed excessive even for their many projects. Near the back fence, fresh dirt covered what looked like industrial waste. Though Caleb couldn't remember any factories in town having recent cleanouts. Parking his truck, he walked the perimeter. The morning dew had barely dried when he spotted something odd, tire tracks leading to a section that should have been closed off. Following them, he discovered fresh soil covering what appeared to be chemical barrels. His stomach twisted as he recognized the warning labels. These weren't meant for regular waste disposal. Mr. Danner, a woman's voice startled him. He turned to find Rose Elliston standing there, her sensible shoes dusty from the gravel path. The schoolteacher's presence at the landfill was unexpected, but her expression was determined. Miss Elliston, he nodded, suddenly self-conscious of his work. Clothes. This isn't really a place for. I've been watching. She cut in, her voice low but firm. The unusual shipments, the late-night deliveries, and I knew you'd notice too. Caleb studied her face, finding no judgment there, only concern. You've been paying attention to the landfill? I've been paying attention to everything since Sylvie disappeared, Rose said. She was more than just a former student. She helped with my after-school program, and the week before she vanished, she seemed scared. Hope flickered in Caleb's chest. Finally, someone else who saw beyond the convenient stories. Did she say anything specific? Rose shook her head. Not directly. But she mentioned her uncle's business practices, how some things weren't right. When I tried to follow up, she was already gone. They walked together along the fence line, Rose pointing out other areas where unusual disposal patterns caught her eye. Her observations matched his own growing suspicions. People underestimate, You, Mr. Danner, she said suddenly. They see what they expect to see, the quiet man who keeps to himself. But I've watched you all these years. You notice things. You care more than you show. Her words touched something deep inside him, a truth he'd been hiding from since Sarah's death. Most folks prefer I stay invisible, he admitted. Well, I don't, Rose said firmly. And neither did Sylvie. She used to say you were the only person who always listened when she spoke at church meetings, even if you never said much yourself. The memory of Sylvie's earnest face during those meetings hit him hard. How many signs had he missed while wrapped in his own grief? Vernon Hale's using this place for more than garbage, he said, gesturing to the suspicious areas. But proving it, we'll find a way, Rose assured him. Her hand touched his arm briefly. You're not alone in this anymore, Mr. Danner. Sometimes the quiet ones see what the loud ones try to hide. Looking at Rose's determined face, Caleb felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the warmth of having someone on his side. Her presence gave weight to his suspicions, transformed them from the paranoid thoughts of a recluse into legitimate concerns, shared by a respected member of the community. Call me Caleb, he said softly. She smiled, and in that moment, the morning sun seemed brighter somehow. Then let's get to work, Caleb. Sylvie's counting on us. Together, they documented the suspicious areas, Rose taking careful notes while Caleb explained the proper waste disposal procedures that were clearly being violated. His years of experience, combined with her methodical approach, began to build a clearer picture of Vernon Hale's illegal activities. For the first time since finding the crate, Caleb felt his resolve solidify into something stronger than mere suspicion. With Rose's support, he wasn't just a garbage man tilting at windmills. He was someone fighting for truth, for justice, for a young woman who deserved better than to be forgotten. Back at Caleb's kitchen table, Rose spread out a map of the county while he sorted through items he'd collected from the landfill. Over the past week, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the window, and the rescued Bobcat Kitten watched them curiously from its makeshift bed in the corner. These came from the same load as the crate, Caleb explained, laying out several objects: a torn blanket with a distinctive flower pattern, a broken hair clip, and a water bottle with teeth marks on the cap, all from the northwest section, where those unusual shipments go. Rose picked up the blanket, examining the pattern closely. I recognize this, she said, her voice tight with emotion. Sylvie had one just like it in her classroom reading corner. She used it during story time. They exchanged worried glances. The evidence of Sylvie's presence was becoming harder to dismiss. Look at this, Rose continued, pointing to specific locations on the map. These old mining tunnels run all through the hills behind Hale's new development site. Most people have forgotten they're even there. Caleb leaned closer, noting how the abandoned mines created a hidden network just outside town. Perfect place to keep someone hidden, he said grimly. As they studied the map, Rose's hand brushed against his. Neither pulled away immediately. The contact, brief as it was, reminded Caleb he wasn't facing this alone anymore. There's something else, he said, reaching for his work jacket. Found this yesterday. He pulled out a crumpled receipt from a local hardware store. The items listed made his blood run cold: heavy-duty locks, chains, and soundproofing material. Rose's face paled as she read it. The signature. It's signed by Marcus Hale, Vernon's brother. She nodded. He showed up in town right around when Sylvie disappeared. He's different from Vernon. Where Vernon uses money and influence, Marcus, she shuddered. He has a reputation for handling problems with his fists. The kitten mewed softly, drawing their attention. Its presence seemed to emphasize the urgency of their situation. Another innocent creature trapped and afraid, just like Sylvie. They spent the next hour marking potential locations on the map, cross-referencing them with Caleb's waste collection. Routes, patterns emerged. The suspicious deliveries always happened near certain mine entrances. Security cameras that should have caught the nighttime activity were conveniently broken or pointed away. Here, Rose said suddenly, tapping a spot on the map, the old Carson Silver mine. It's the only one with road access that's completely hidden from the highway. And look, she traced a line with her finger. It connects underground to 3 other tunnel systems. If anything went wrong, they'd have multiple escape routes. Caleb felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. Marcus Hale's truck. I've seen it parked near there during my early morning runs. Always thought he was just checking development sites, but he's guarding her, Rose finished, her voice barely a whisper. The reality of what they were facing settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about exposing illegal dumping anymore. They were up against people willing to imprison a young woman. People who wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. Marcus Hale was in prison before, Rose added, her hands trembling slightly as she folded the map. Aggravated assault. Vernon got him out early, but everyone knows he's still violent. He's the muscle behind Vernon's threats. Caleb thought about the subtle warning in Vernon's voice during their confrontation. He dismissed Caleb as just the trash man, but if they kept digging, that dismissal could turn deadly. We need to be careful, he said, reaching out to steady Rose's shaking hands. But we can't stop. Not now that we know. Rose gripped his fingers tightly. Sylvie's counting on us, even if she doesn't know it yet. The kitten patted over, rubbing against their joined hands as if offering its own encouragement. Its presence reminded them of how this all started, with a desperate message carved into a wooden crate, a cry for help that only Caleb was meant to find. Tomorrow, Caleb said, his voice firm with newfound purpose. We'll start checking the mine entrances, but we do it smart. No risks that could tip them off. Rose nodded, her earlier fear transforming into determination. I'll document everything. Times, dates, vehicle movements. They might have power, but we'll have proof. As they finalized their plans, Caleb realized how much had changed in just a few days. He'd gone from being the invisible garbage man to someone fighting against genuine evil. The danger was real and growing, but with Rose beside him, he felt stronger than he had in years. The sun was setting now, painting the kitchen in deep orange hues. Tomorrow would bring them closer to the truth, but it would also put them directly in the path of people who solved problems with violence. The stakes were higher than ever, but turning back was no longer an option. The kitten dozed in a patch of fading sunlight, its tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Caleb watched it, his mind turning over recent events like worn river stones. Something about the kitten's presence had been nagging at him, a detail that didn't quite fit. Wait, he said suddenly, causing Rose to look up from her notes. The kitten. It wasn't just trapped in there by accident. What do you mean? Caleb leaned forward, the pieces falling into place. Think about it. A wild bobcat kitten, small enough to fit through the gaps in that crate. If someone had just thrown it in there, it would have escaped easily. His voice grew more intense, but it stayed. And those claw marks inside, they weren't just random scratches. They were around the carved message. Rose's eyes widened with understanding. Sylvie put it there herself. She must have. Caleb stood up, pacing the kitchen floor. She knew that crate would end up in the landfill. She knew I'd be the one to find it. His throat tightened with emotion. She carved that message with her last bit of strength, and she put that kitten in there because a kind person wouldn't ignore a trapped animal. Rose finished softly. She was counting on someone's compassion. The realization hit Caleb like a physical force. This wasn't just about finding a mysterious message anymore. Sylvie had reached out deliberately, placing her trust in the hands of whoever might find that crate. She counted on basic human decency, and fate had chosen him to answer that call. The kitten stirred, stretching lazily before padding over to where Caleb stood. It rubbed against his legs, a gesture that now carried so much more meaning. This wasn't just a rescued animal. It was a living connection to Sylvie, a piece of her desperate bid for freedom. She must have been so scared, Rose whispered, watching the kitten. But even then, she didn't give up. She made a plan, took a chance. Caleb knelt down, gently running his hand over the kitten's fur. All his earlier doubts about getting involved, all his hesitation about standing up to the Hales, they seemed trivial now. Sylvie had done the impossible, finding a way to reach out from her prison. How could he do any less than answer? No more holding back, he said firmly. No more playing it safe. Sylvie trusted that someone would find her message and care enough to help. She's counting on us. Rose moved to stand beside him, her presence steady and supportive. She chose well, even if she didn't know who would find it. You're exactly the kind of person she was hoping for, Caleb. The kitten climbed into Caleb's lap, its purring a gentle reminder of the responsibility he'd been given. The small creature was more than just a survivor now. It was a symbol of Sylvie's courage, her refusal to be silenced. Every time he'd cared for it, fed it, protected it, he'd been keeping her hope alive. I always wondered why I couldn't let this go, he said quietly. Now I know. This isn't just something I stumbled into. Sylvie chose this path and somehow it led to me. I have to see it through. The weight of this understanding settled over him, not as a burden, but as a source of strength. All the pieces had aligned, the crate in his root, his ability to care for the kitten, even meeting Rose who could help him pursue the truth. None of it was coincidence. It was the result of one brave young woman refusing to disappear without a trace. The setting sun cast long shadows across the kitchen floor. But Caleb's path had never been clearer. Sylvie had done the impossible by getting her message out. Now it was his turn to do whatever it took to bring her home. The morning air bit cold and sharp as Caleb and Rose studied a crumpled shipping manifest. They'd recovered from the landfill office. Their breath made small clouds in the dawn light, while they traced their fingers along delivery routes. "Look at these timestamps," Rose whispered, pointing to a column of numbers. "Every Tuesday night, 3 trucks head up toward the old Sterling mine. That's way more traffic than an abandoned site should have." Caleb nodded, his weathered face grim. "And the weights don't match standard loads. Something's not right up there." They had spent days piecing together patterns, watching trucks come and go, noting which ones seemed suspicious. The abandoned mine had emerged as the center of it all, a perfect hiding place, remote and forgotten by most of the town. "I need to get closer," Caleb said, folding the paper carefully. "Maybe find a way to Rose corrected firmly. "We need to get closer." But Caleb shook his head. "Not this time. It's too dangerous. I'll just do a quick scout of the area." The worry in Rose's eyes made him pause, but he couldn't risk her safety. Not with what they discovered about Vernon Hale's operation. She reluctantly agreed to wait at the library, researching property records while he investigated. As Caleb drove his waste truck toward the back section of the landfill, closer to where the mine access road began, something felt wrong. The usual morning bustle was absent. No other trucks moved between the mountains of refuse. Even the seagulls seemed scarce. He pulled to a stop near a towering pile of crushed appliances, cutting the engine. The silence pressed in around him. That's when he heard it, the low rumble of a diesel engine approaching from behind. Before he could react, a massive yellow bulldozer roared past his truck, its blade raised high. At its controls sat one of Vernon Hale's men, a cruel smile visible beneath his hard hat. 2 more men emerged from behind piles of debris, carrying baseball bats. "Boss says you've been asking too many questions, trash man," one called out. Caleb's heart hammered as he threw his truck into reverse. But another bulldozer appeared behind him, blocking his escape. He was trapped. The first bulldozer's blade swung toward his truck, forcing him to abandon it. He scrambled out the passenger door, narrowly avoiding the men with bats as he ran between towering walls of garbage and earth. The sound of engines grew louder. They were hurting him, he realized with horror. Every turn led him deeper into a maze of dirt mountains and crushed debris. His lungs burned as he ran, searching desperately for a way out. A wall of earth suddenly collapsed beside him as one of the bulldozers smashed through it. Caleb dove to the side, rolling in the dirt. When he looked up, he found himself in a dead end, surrounded by 30-foot walls of packed soil and trash. The bulldozers approached from both sides, their engines growling like hungry beasts. Above him, Vernon Hale's men stood at the top of the dirt walls, grinning down as they began pushing with shovels and boots, starting avalanches of earth. "Time to bury the trash man," one called out mockingly. The first wave of dirt hit Caleb like a flood, knocking him off his feet. He tried to run, but the bulldozer's blades were creating a pit, pushing mountains of earth and debris toward him from all sides. The walls were collapsing inward, tons of soil and garbage raining down. Caleb felt the earth swallow him, the weight crushed against his chest as darkness closed in. He clawed desperately upward, but more dirt kept coming. His lungs screamed for air. This was how he would die. Buried alive in the very landfill that had been his life. Sylvie's carved message flashed through his mind. The kitten's trusting eyes. Rose's unwavering faith in him. With a roar that used the last of his oxygen, Caleb drove his arms upward through the crushing weight. His fingers broke through to air just as consciousness began to fade. Somehow he pulled himself up through the dirt, every muscle trembling with effort. He emerged gasping, covered in soil, barely alive. The bulldozers were gone. His attackers had left him for dead. Caleb collapsed on his hands and knees, coughing up dirt, drawing desperate breaths. He had nearly died. They had nearly killed him. The reality of what he was facing hit him fully for the first time. As his breathing steadied, a choice crystallized in his mind. He could walk away now, go back to his quiet life, forget about Sylvie, forget about the corruption. No one would blame him after this. But as he looked at his dirt-covered hands, he remembered the carved words in that crate. "I can't escape." If he gave up now, Sylvie's fate would be sealed. Her desperate plea would go unanswered. His body ached as he pushed himself to his feet. They had tried to bury him, just as they had buried the truth about Sylvie. But like her message, he had found a way to surface. There would be no surrender. Not now. Not ever. Rose's hands trembled as she cleaned the dirt from Caleb's cuts. They sat in her small kitchen, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the window. Caleb winced as she dabbed antiseptic on a particularly deep scrape along his forearm. "They tried to kill you," she whispered, her voice thick with concern. "We need to call the police." Caleb shook his head slowly. The sheriff's in Hale's pocket. We'd be wasting our time, he coughed, still tasting dirt. Besides, it would only warn them we're getting close. Rose set down the first aid supplies and pulled out a folder from her teaching bag. While you were at the landfill, I did some digging of my own. The state environmental inspection team is coming next Tuesday. They do it every 6 months. She spread several printed documents across her kitchen table. It's our chance, Caleb. Maybe our only one. Caleb leaned forward, studying the papers despite his aching muscles. What exactly are you thinking? The inspection team checks for illegal dumping. Proper waste management, everything. Rose's eyes lit up with determination. If we can prove Hale's been using the landfill for illegal operations, they'll have to investigate. And when they do, they'll find evidence of Sylvie. Caleb finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. Rose nodded. I've marked the areas where you noticed suspicious shipments. She pointed to a hand-drawn map. If we document everything before the inspection team arrives, get proof of what's really being buried there. It's risky, Caleb said, rubbing his dirt-stained hands together. After today, they'll be watching the landfill even closer. That's why we need to be smart about this. Rose pulled out another document. Look here. The inspection team always follows the same route. They check the main processing area first, then move to the newer sections. If we time it right, Caleb studied the inspection route. We could plant evidence for them to find. Documents, photographs, exactly. Rose's voice grew stronger. We're not just looking for Sylvie anymore. We're gathering ammunition. Everything Hale's tried to bury, literally and figuratively, we bring it into the light. They spent the next hour planning, marking locations on maps, listing what they needed to document. Caleb's near-death experience had changed something fundamental. The quiet waste hauler who'd always kept to himself was gone. In his place sat a man ready to fight. I can get photos of the suspicious areas tomorrow during my regular rounds, Caleb said, marking spots on the map. They won't expect me to quit after today's warning. That's our advantage. Rose touched his arm gently. Are you sure you want to go back there? After what happened? Caleb met her concerned gaze. They tried to bury me, Rose, just like they buried Sylvie's truth. But we're both still here. Still fighting. He managed a small smile. Besides, I've got something they don't. What's that? Someone who believes in me. The words came out, softer than he intended, but they hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Rose's cheeks flushed slightly, but she stayed focused on their plan. The inspection team arrives at 8 o'clock Tuesday morning. We'll need to place our evidence the night before. Somewhere they're sure to find it. I know just the spot, Caleb said, pointing to a location on the map. There's a processing shed they always check first. If we leave a trail of breadcrumbs leading from there. They worked out the details as evening approached. Their plan was dangerous if caught. They'd face more than just threats this time. But the alternative was letting Sylvie remain trapped. Letting Hale continue his corrupt operations unchecked. We'll need to be careful with the timing, Rose said, gathering the papers. Once we plant the evidence, there's no turning back. Caleb nodded, standing carefully despite his bruised body. We've got 3 days to gather everything we need. Photos, documents, anything that points to both the illegal dumping and Sylvie's captivity. 3 days to end this, Rose agreed. She looked at him with worried eyes. Promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. They might try again. I promise. Caleb headed for the door, then paused. Thank you, Rose, for believing in me when no one else did. She smiled warmly. Sometimes, the people others overlook turn out to be the bravest of all. As Caleb drove home in the gathering dusk, their plan felt both terrifying and right. They were no longer just searching for clues. They were preparing for battle. In 3 days, they would force the truth into the open, no matter the cost. Hale's kingdom of secrets was about to face the light of day. The night air bit cold and sharp as Caleb and Rose crept toward the abandoned mine entrance. Their flashlight beams cut through darkness, revealing rusty equipment and crumbling support beams. Every step echoed against weathered stone walls. This way, Caleb whispered, pointing to fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Someone's been here recently. The Bobcat Kitten followed close to Caleb's heels, its wild eyes reflecting their lights. Over the past weeks, it had grown stronger, more confident, but still refused to leave Caleb's side. Rose gripped Caleb's arm as they heard a distant sound. Listen. A faint voice floated through the tunnel, female, weak but unmistakable. Sylvie. They moved faster now, following the sound. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where mining equipment lay scattered. Behind a metal door, they heard movement. Help. The voice was clearer now. Please, someone. Caleb's hands shook as he worked the door's lock with tools he brought. Each click seemed thunderously loud in the confined space. Finally, the lock gave way inside. Sylvie lay on a thin mattress, her wrist bound with rope. Her face was pale, her clothes dirty, but her eyes blazed with life when she saw them. "You found my message," she whispered. "The kitten. Save your strength," Rose said, moving to untie her. "We're getting you out of here." That's when they heard the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. "Well, ain't this touching?" Harlan Hale's gravelly voice filled the chamber. He stood in the shadows, his rifle trained on them, the trash man playing hero. Caleb stepped between the gun and the others. "It's over, Harlan. People know we're here. Don't matter none." Harlan's scarred face twisted in a cruel smile. "You'll all be dead before anyone comes looking." He fired. The shot exploded through the chamber. Caleb dove, tackling Rose and Sylvie behind an old mining cart. The bullet sparked off metal above their heads. "Get them out," Caleb shouted to Rose. "The back tunnel, go." Rose helped Sylvie to her feet. They stumbled toward the rear passage as Caleb grabbed the length of rusted pipe, charging at Harlan. The bigger man swung his rifle like a club. It caught Caleb in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He fell hard but rolled away from the next blow, swinging the pipe at Harlan's legs. Metal met bone with a sickening crack. Harlan howled but didn't go down. Instead, he grabbed Caleb's throat, lifting him off his feet. "Should have stayed with your garbage," Harlan snarled, squeezing. Black spots danced in Caleb's vision. His lungs screamed for air. The pipe slipped. From his numbing fingers, then came an unexpected sound, a wild screech of fury. The Bobcat Kitten launched itself at Harlan's face, all claws and teeth, though small. Its attack was fierce and sudden. Harlan screamed, dropping Caleb to protect. His eyes. Caleb gasped for air, then seized his chance. He drove his shoulder into Harlan's midsection, sending them both crashing into the chamber wall. The rifle clattered away. They grappled on the dirt, trading desperate blows. Harlan was stronger, but Caleb fought with the determination of a man who'd already survived being buried alive. He wouldn't fail now. The Bobcat struck again, raking Harlan's arm. In that moment of distraction, Caleb found the fallen pipe. He swung with everything he had. The impact dropped Harlan like a stone. He lay still, blood trickling from his temple. Caleb stood shakily, his whole body aching. The Bobcat Kitten pressed against his leg. "It's for bristling." "Thank you," he whispered. To the wild creature, it had repaid his kindness in full measure. He found Rose and Sylvie in the back tunnel. Sylvie could barely walk, weakened from weeks of captivity, but her spirit remained unbroken. "I knew someone would understand," she said as they helped her toward the exit. "The kitten. I hoped it would lead someone good to my message." "Save your strength," Rose told her again, but softer this time. "You're safe now." They emerged under stars, the cold mountain air sweet with freedom. Sylvie breathed deeply, tears streaming down her face. The Bobcat Kitten padded alongside them, its mission seemingly complete. It had helped save not only itself, but all of them. Caleb looked back at the mine entrance, knowing Vernon Hale would face justice soon. But for now, getting Sylvie to safety was all that mattered. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, even to a wild creature, returned in ways no one could predict. The morning of the state inspection dawned clear and cold. Caleb's waste hauler truck rumbled up to the landfill entrance, where 3 official vehicles already waited. State investigators in dark jackets consulted clipboards, while Vernon Hale tried to maintain his usual confident smile. That smile faltered when he saw Caleb wasn't alone. Rose stepped out of the passenger side, carrying a thick folder of documents. Behind them, police cars appeared on the access road, lights flashing. "What's the meaning of this?" Hale demanded, his face reddening. The lead investigator, a stern woman with steel gray hair, stepped forward. "Mr. Hale, we have evidence of serious environmental violations. These citizens have provided documentation of illegal toxic waste disposal." Rose opened her folder, spreading out photographs and shipping manifests. "There's more," she said firmly. "Much more." The investigators gathered around the evidence while Hale's composure cracked. "This is absurd. You can't trust the word of a garbage man and a schoolteacher." "Actually," the investigator replied, "we can and do, especially with police testimony about a kidnapping victim found in your abandoned mine property." Sylvie appeared, then walking slowly but steadily between 2 officers. Though still pale, determination showed in every step. The side of her struck Hale like a physical blow. "Uncle Vernon," she said, her voice carrying across the morning air. "It's over. They know everything. The bribes, the toxic dumping. What you did to keep me quiet." Hale lunged toward her, but officers moved quickly to restrain him. His expensive suit wrinkled as they secured his hands behind his back, reading him his rights. "You're nothing," he shouted at Caleb. "Just trash. Who do you think you are?" Caleb stood straight. meeting Hale's wild eyes. I'm the man who listened when no one else would. That's who I am. The Bobcat Kitten, which had been hiding in Caleb's truck, leaped down to stand beside him. Though still wild, it had chosen to stay, forming an unlikely bond with the man who saved it. As Hale was led away, townspeople began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Many were the same ones who had dismissed Caleb for years, whispering behind his back. Now they watched in amazement as investigators praised him, as Sylvie hugged him with tears of gratitude. I never thought anyone would find my message, she told the growing crowd. But Mr. Danner did. He and Ms. Elliston risked everything to help me when everyone else looked away. The town's mayor stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Danner, we owe you an apology. All of us. We've treated you unfairly for far too long. Caleb nodded, accepting the words without bitterness. The years of loneliness after his wife's death had built walls around him, but helping Sylvie had broken them down. He wasn't that same isolated man anymore. Rose moved closer, slipping her hand into his. The touch was natural, comfortable, like coming home after a long journey. You're a hero, Caleb Danner, she said softly. You always were. Some of us just saw it sooner than others. The Bobcat Kitten rubbed against their legs, purring. It had grown sleeker under Caleb's care, though its wild heart remained untamed. Like Caleb himself, it had found its own way to trust again. Through the morning, investigators documented the evidence of Hale's crimes. Each revelation brought gasps from the townspeople. The scope of corruption, the dangers that had lurked beneath their peaceful community. But Caleb barely heard it all. He stood with Rose, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Her hand was warm in his, promising a future he'd stopped believing in years ago. What happens now? Someone asked him. Caleb looked at Rose, at the kitten, at the town that was, seeing him with new eyes. Now we build something better, he said simply, together. The morning light caught the silver in his hair, the strength in his weathered face. He wasn't just the trash man anymore. He was Caleb Danner, the man who had fought for justice when others wouldn't, the man who had saved not only Sylvie, but something precious in himself. Rose squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. Sometimes, love and redemption came in unexpected ways, through a desperate message, a wild kitten, and the courage to stand up when it mattered most. The Bobcat Kitten stretched in the morning sun, as free and unafraid as Caleb's heart had finally become. If this story found you at the right moment, subscribe and stay close. Tomorrow's may be the reminder you didn't know you needed.